Welcome back 40k fans to another episode of Faction Focus, and this time we're looking at Tyranids. So Tyranids, you'll obviously start to see some pictures on the screen as well, but Tyranids are the most alien looking out of all the factions in 40k, and this is a main reason a lot of people choose them. They generally have a lot of nice colour schemes out there, ranging from the complex to the simple. With Tyranids being primarily a more organic looking army, so you haven't got like your tanks, all of their big stuff is generally creatures. This makes for interesting for modelling and painting, which can be a bit of a turn off for some people, because with Tyranids they are a horde based army, so you primarily want to overwhelm your opponent with sheer numbers, and because of this you'll generally outnumber your opponent. And obviously that can put people off from painting side of it, because if you've got, say, 60 to 80 normal little grubbies guys, your little termagants and your hormigans, it can put a lot of people off from the painting element. So obviously with Tyranids, you've got the colour schemes, as I mentioned earlier, which, getting past the whole daunting aspect, you've got a lot of free reign out there. You can make it as complex as you want, or you can make it as simple as you want as well, which makes some very interesting colour schemes out there. So for Tyranids, the way that they generally work in regards to battle is, as I said earlier, you generally want to try and overwhelm your opponent. Combat is where you want to be with Tyranids. You do have some dedicated units out there to support you in regards to shooting. Some standouts are things like your Hive Guard, your Exocrine, and of course you've got a nice, some very, very cool HQ choices out there and powerful psychers for psychic support to buff your units, make them quicker, and of course dish out some extra pain in the psychic phase. So combat, like I said, combat is definitely where you want to be with Tyranids. Gene Stealers are easily one of the best combat units out there. And because they're so cheap in regards to points, you'll tend to get a lot of them. Now, the drawbacks, every army has a drawback. Now, the drawbacks for Tyranids, I'd probably say, is mostly toughness for some of the smaller creatures and the saves. So Gene Stealers are a toughness of 4, which is matching for your Space Marine, but they certainly don't get a 3+ armor save. You'll be looking at a 5+ for your Invulnerable, which a 5+, it sounds bad, but with it being an invulnerable, it does mean that things like las cannons, there is times that 5+ invulnerable can save against things like a las cannon shot. So it's kind of weighing out. But generally with Tyranids, your army is so big, you've got so many different units out there, that you're not really bothered if you lose a squad of 10, really, because you'll have a lot more behind. And that kind of leads me on to the way that you want to kind of use them for the war, so on game. So once you've deployed, once you're happy, you basically want to run as fast as you possibly can. And there's a lot of powers and a lot of different units out there that can still lend fire support even after they've done that. So you want your front lines to be running as fast as you can to get into that combat. And once you hit, you will hit like a hammer, especially if you've got your dedicated assault troops and you've kept a lot of your Gene Stealers, a lot of your things like your Trigons, your Carnifexes, all the hard-hitting combat power. And generally, it's like a scene from Starship Troopers, if you've ever seen the film, where you will get in there, your enemy will be firing shot upon shot upon shot to try and take you down. But if you hit combat, if you break into the enemy's lines, 9 times out of 10, you will absolutely mincemeat out of the enemy deployment zone. And I've seen it done time and time again. But like I say, you do have to be a little bit careful occasionally. Keep your HQ safe, and also keep your very, very hard hitting things like your Gene Stealers. You want to screen them with things like your weaker units, your Termagants. You want them to go in front. You want them to get obliterated. Then your Gene Stealers hit. They basically clamber over the corpses and hit the enemy lines. And that is pretty much it for Tyranids. You've got a gorgeous, gorgeous selection of units out there for you to have a look at. Some of them obviously being on the screen. You've got some really interesting colour schemes. It can be a little bit daunting because of the model count, but because of the colour schemes out there, pick a colour that suits yourself and roll with it. and of course a nice little variety for your psychic powers as well. And that pretty much covers for the Tyranid tactics and the way that generally that the army normally functions. So, like I say, there is more in-depth out there, but just for beginners, Tyranid's pretty damn solid choice for an army to do. The only kind of drawback, like I say, that may put people off from beginning is the sheer amount of models. But once you see a fully massive army of Tyranids on the board and they're all fully painted, it's an absolute joy to use and to play against. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode for Tyranids for the Faction Focus. Please check out the rest of the Faction Focus series. Give us a like and a subscribe. And until next time, guys, happy wargaming.